Hello, this is Jason Buto, the Curriculum Coordinator for the General McLean School District and Principal of Parker Middle School. What I want you to do today is walk you through the results of a process that has been occurring over the course of the last couple months to develop a response to the COVID-19 crisis and develop a path forward. I've been leading a rapid response team that we've entitled Learning Loss and Learning Forward. What we're doing is we're looking at the learning that we lost in the spring of 2020 when we went into shutdown and how we're going to move forward during the 2020-21 school year in light of how COVID will impact what we do as a school. There were several staff members in the General McLean School District that were a regular part of our team meetings that help construct the plan that I'm going to walk you through here momentarily. You can see that list of people ranges from district administrators to MTSS and intervention personnel, as well as classroom teachers. A big thank you goes out to all of these people who gave their time away from their families and summer vacation to engage in this process and put together some meaningful and practical steps for us to follow as a district. All of the slides that you're going to see, every part of this plan is based in several areas of research. One of the most important things that informed the work of this committee was the parent surveys. We surveyed our parents at the end of our spring 2020 COVID shutdown time and got a lot of good information from them. At that time, we surveyed them again as we went into the summer, looking at their thoughts and ideas on the reopening of school in the fall. We've also looked at recommendations from the Centers for Disease Control, PA Department of Ed, U.S. Department of Ed, our local health officials, the American Association of Pediatrics. A lot of our research came from an organization called EAB, an education research firm that put out a helpful roadmap for schools planning for fall reopenings. Mathematica did a report for PA schools to help them prepare, and there were various other sources that we informed our work as well. There were several objectives that we started with as a team, and these first three objectives are with regard to learning loss. So what we did is we went into an analysis of what happened in the spring during our shutdown, and we identified curriculum components that were covered before the shutdown, during the shutdown, which we recognized may have been compromised somewhat and not as effective as usual, and then the concepts that were totally skipped because of the shutdown for various reasons. We then looked at those components that were covered during the shutdown or not covered at all that we felt were critical for us to revisit here in the fall. We identified those. And then we also identified those things that were either skipped or covered during the shutdown that really were not critical at all to our work. And so we called this work gap analysis work. We got together core content teachers, and a lot of this happened before the end of school in the spring of 2020. These gap analyses have been shared with teachers in the receiving grade level. So a gap analysis in second grade was shared with the third grade teachers because they're the ones that are going to be receiving these kids that may have these compromised learning or these learning gaps. For teachers that did not do the gap analyses or did not have those gap analyses, during our in-service days, there are videos that will be shared with you to help you walk through the process of performing a gap analysis. The next 5 objectives, or the final 5 objectives for this rapid response team, were all dealing with the reopening of school in the fall here of 2020. For these objectives, you can see them there. They're all basically dealing with looking at state standards that we feel are critical and identifying those state standards that we feel based on our professional experience, based on testing, what do we feel are non-critical that we could either do without this year, or maybe even save them for the end of the year and cover them at that point. We talked about MAP assessment, CDT assessment, gathering information on student gaps. And then we actually went into the curriculum documents for each of our courses. And based on our analysis of the standards, we identified the specific curriculum objectives that were critical for this year. And we identified the curriculum objectives that were non-critical for this year and could be saved either to the end of the year or skipped altogether. And then finally, we developed a learning plan that would be consistent for all of our teachers and all of our students in all areas of learning throughout the year this year, and I'll share that with you. And then we determined how to maximize our interventions that we might become necessary through the year. So curriculum decluttering, that was that first objective on the previous screen. Again, I've sort of described that already. We identified critical and non-critical components, and we will be delivering a decluttered curriculum this year. Now, again, there are some teachers that did not have the opportunity to perform a decluttering of their curriculum, or no decluttering was performed on their content area. So again, on the in-service day, videos will be shared that will guide teachers through the process of decluttering their curriculum, identifying what is most important for them as we move into this school year. When you look at objectives 2, 4, and 5 in the Learning Forward slides, we wanted to talk about what school will look like in the fall. And so we've mapped out, in the green phase, all students are going to come to school for a half day, either the morning session or the afternoon session, with social distancing measures in place. Now, if the state moves us to the yellow phase, we're still going to be following this plan because we're going to have reduced numbers of students in the building at one time. If the state moves us to the red phase, all schools will be closed, will be remote learning only. And then finally, we have a group of students that will be in our GM Cyber program this year. These are students who are learning online at home all year long. And so we wanted to develop a plan that will work for all those groups of students based on some key concepts from the research. We want to limit face-to-face contact as much as possible when students are here with us in our building. We want to make contact tracing as easy as possible. It is likely that as we have COVID cases this year, that contact tracing will fall upon us as a school district. And so we want to make that as easy as possible. And then finally, we want to be able to shift approaches with as little disruption to learning as possible. We want to be able to go from green to yellow to red in a smooth fashion. We want kids to be able to move smoothly from the GM Cyber program back into our buildings, or maybe from coming to school in person into the GM Cyber program for various reasons. Family situations could change, kids could get sick, all those other things. So we're basically looking at 3 specific groups of students that have to educate simultaneously with a similar approach this year. We have students who are coming to school for half days in the green and yellow phases. We have students who are at home full-time. Those are if we're in the red phase. If we have our students who are in our GM Cyber program. And then we probably are going to have a high measure of absentee students this year. Kids may have a family member that tests positive. They may have to be on a 14-day quarantine. We may have a student that develops allergies, and because they're exhibiting symptoms that may be COVID-related, they're going to be absent. So the critical components for learning with all these groups of students is we wanted, again, an approach that was similar for all groups of students that would allow them to move smoothly from area to area. And so that is an approach that is been developed more specifically at your building level. That outline will be described more specifically to you by your building principals. Now, for GM Cyber students, there are a couple key things that we learned from the spring and from our research. We know that it's critical for those students to have live interaction with staff on a regular basis, and we're going to say 2 times a week at least during this process. We are going to provide a large group video conference for the students in the GM Cyber, and then we also want to provide one small group or one-on-one video conference. Now, how this occurs is very flexible. Again, your principal will be sharing with you how these video conferences are to occur and what specific people will be doing those video conferences and keeping track of those cyber school students. Our group looked at, as a rapid response team, how we could maximize the usage of staff. And so in our health and safety plan that was submitted to the state and board approved, hopefully on August 5th, we're going to have to do a lot of different things and be flexible with staffing. In instances where staff are underutilized, we may be asked to cover or assist in other areas of need. What that means is we may have some different people that are creating the video lessons and keeping track of our cyber kids. We may have some different people that are delivering interventions, maybe teachers or staff members that have a lighter role during this time of COVID. So here's a list of high school support staff. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some people that may have some different roles during the shutdown, may be plugged in other areas during green, yellow, or red phases, or having some role with our cyber kids. Again, here's our list from McCain and Edinboro. Again, the changes to these, the roles of these staff members will be determined by the principal at the building level. We talked about, as a group, we seriously looked at bringing in some kids in the summertime to give them some assessments to help us further identify gaps. And our team concluded that the time and energy that it would take to do that would probably not be worth the effort, because we're planning on giving those assessments, especially the MAP assessment in K through 8, at the beginning of the school year in September. So that will give us a good handle on any learning gaps that our kids experience from the shutdown in the spring. Our team was tasked with looking at intervention and how we do intervention at the building level. And here you can see a description of how McCain currently does their intervention in the MTSS model, and under COVID, how that will change and adjust based on our new guidelines and how we'll be operating. Again, Edinboro, with an established solid MTSS system similar to McCain. Again, they have a way of operating in the current system, but as we shift to our COVID-impacted learning this year, you can see some descriptions here of how that will be done. Again, a lot of that determined at the building level. For Parker Middle School, intervention in the past was delivered through exploratory classes. That won't be an option here during this year. So the interventions are going to be identified through the MAP assessments, and there will be a team of people that will include Dr. Brown and our exploratory teachers to help deliver those interventions. At the high school, there will not be any specific intervention for kids beyond what is normally done in a yearly level. All the normal classes will be offered at the high school. So as you know, there are several different levels of math, several different levels of language arts, and even in science and social studies. So those classes will continue to meet as usual, and so we're targeting our highest need learners by grouping them in our current system. Part of our rapid response team was developing plans for in-service days with regard to the work that we've been completing. So we know that as a district, we're going to have 2 days in the summer, focused on technology, curriculum, trauma-informed care training, health and safety, and then 3 days of in-person training. So for the portion of this rapid response team was responsible for, a half a day of our virtual in-service training is going to be reserved for the Learning Forward activities described below. And you can see there are basically 4 objectives. If teachers didn't complete gap analyses or curriculum decluttering, they'll be able to do that virtually at their own pace sometime between now and the start of school. If they have decluttered curriculum, they'll begin reviewing that, begin mapping out a plan for how to deliver that decluttered curriculum, and then submitting some feedback on the decluttered curriculum, some ideas on their plans moving forward that will be discussed on our in-person in-service day, which is described here below. This is likely to occur on August 19th, and the objectives there would be to get together with those in your curriculum area, either your grade level or your content, along with any teaching partners you have. If there's an extra aid support that you're going to be joining you this year, or maybe a specials teacher joining you this year, getting together and discussing your decluttered curriculum, your learning plan, map out roles, and then discuss the decluttered curriculum, your thoughts and ideas on moving that forward. Another area that this team tackled was with regard to attendance. For attendance policy, we had to determine how we were going to track attendance for kids in the cyber program, as well as if we go into the red phase and all students are home. This plan was developed in cooperation with Denise Stuck-Lewis, our local magistrate, who enforces our truancy laws and procedures here. She was in favor of this plan and helped us develop it. So in the green and red phases, attendance is going to be tracked as we traditionally do. If a student comes to school for their half day, we're going to count them as being in attendance that day. If they don't, they'll be non-attendance. Now, we know absenteeism is going to be way up this year, and so with regard to our 10-day letters and all of that, we're still going to proceed with that, but when it comes to actually filing truancy, we will look at the students' performance in the classroom and their academic grades and how they're performing. And if there's also an academic concern with those kids, it's likely we'll go into that truancy process. Now for GM Cyber students, attendance is going to be reported as a percentage of the classroom assignments they've attempted. Again, we're not just going to look at the amount of time their computer is turned on. We want to make sure that they're progressing with their assignments. We want to have a measure of accountability there. So if in a 20-day period a kid attempts 50% of their assignments, they would be considered absent 10 of those 20 days and potentially would move forward to the truancy process if their attendance continues to lag. This is also how we will track attendance if we go into a red phase and all schools are shut down and all at-home learning occurs. We will use the completion of assignments as our measuring stick for attendance. And then finally, just a note on grading. We will be grading students as we have normally before the pandemic according to our regular procedures. So that concludes the report from the Rapid Response Team, Learning Loss and Learning Forward. I hope that it has been helpful to you. If you know those team members that participated, please thank them for the tremendous work they did in helping us put this together.